Well, hello, Leslie Fletcher NP and master injector trainer, queen of traveling and instructing all over the world, by the way. I'm so excited to have nailed you down for this exciting interview on a topic you and I have been waiting to really discuss in our industry. So I would love to just introduce yourself to the audience a little bit. Where are you today?
Yeah, so I am in Torrance, California, which is where we're located. I'm actually in my office at the Institute. So I have like a little office that I set aside for filming and podcasts, quiet, away from everything. And so that's where I'm at on this side.
I'm jealous because you're probably going to hear like a lawnmower, on my side.
Oh, well,
Cool.
you might actually hear a baby because three of our practitioners had babies this year, and it's baby day. So the little daycare station is just a couple doors down. So you
That's
may hear that.
amazing. That's so cool. So I happen to have actually seen myself. I had the good fortune over, I think in December I remember it was a kind of a holiday, around holiday time, to come and take a tour of the Injectability Clinic and Training Center. And I did happen to see, I think you had babies being born and babies born.
Well, we didn't birth them here, but they were on the way.
No. Yeah. Yeah. And I thought that was so cool. And, just one thing, and I think as we really dive into the conversation today, that in itself is a testament to the way that you value your team, the way that you invest in not just developing the people, you're committed to making sure that you've built a really incredible culture. And I think that that lends itself to obviously helping you teach other practitioners how to not just inject, but also to build a business where people want to work for you and patients want to come. It's just a really incredible place. So let's talk a little bit, Leslie, about how you sort of came to be. I know people who know you obviously see you travel all over. I mean, really all over the world. But I follow you on Instagram, and I don't even know how you do it. Like, how do we keep up with Leslie? But how did you get to be this? Where is this the passion that inspired everything that you do now? Tell us a little bit about kind of how you became Leslie Fletcher to build this clinic and now the mission that you're on.
Yeah. I mean, I really just like to say that I was at the right place at the right time. I got in at the ground floor of something completely new, a new field of medicine that didn't even exist when I started in 2001. But going back a little bit further, my friend that I went to nursing school with actually went to nursing school to be a plastic surgery nurse. And I was like 19, 20. I didn't even know like what that meant. But she and I had a passion for interior design and fashion, and we completed nursing school together, and then she did actually end up going into the field, and she called me and she's like, you have got to get into this field. It is perfect for us. It really is a great outlet for design and medicine, and there really isn't a lot in medicine like this. And so I checked it out, and it was a perfect match for me, and I haven't looked back ever since. So it really was a great fit because I was able to kind of blend both sides of the brain, the right and left side, and put it together in a perfect marriage. So passion, I think, comes from being there from the beginning and watching how things have evolved, and over time realizing that maybe the techniques and the evolution haven't been disseminated in the best way. And so you kind of become the expert when you've been there since the beginning. But then I look back at other people that I started with, they're not all, in fact, most of them aren't educators. So there has to be something else as far as like that passion for education and disseminating information and getting it out there in a way that is receivable and reproducible.
Yeah, it's funny because I ask myself all the time, is aesthetic medicine an art or a science? And it's really the one part of, I think, medicine where, and one, obviously in plastic surgery, but where it's so, both are so incredibly important. So like from the standpoint of someone who's able to really be a great injector, I can imagine they'd have to have the visual, visionary kind of mind and the ability to really see the art form of it. So I love that. So, the purpose really for this conversation today, this stemmed from, some series of conversations that you and I have had, is just me being an inquiring mind, and obviously some of the nuances that I've experienced in working with clients through, our work that we do at Kelsey, a lot on the business side, on the mindset of leadership and growth. And, when we work with clients, I almost have to assume that they're just really great at what they do, from a clinical standpoint, that they're investing in that independently. And I remember there was like a 1 or 2 week period where I had this aha moment. I was having a conversation with an injector who's been injecting for several years, and we're looking at the growth trends in our business. And I was seeing like the same number, like the same checkout, like ticket number, like the price per patient per visit, like again and again and again and again. And I was like, why is everybody getting the same thing done? What's going on? And so I was just kind of picking her brain about things. And, I just asked her, I said, can you talk to me a little bit about the consultation process? And, do you not have clients that are asking for multiple syringes? And, eventually she came out and said, well, I'm just not that comfortable. I've been injecting a long time, but I don't feel that great at like multiple syringes, and it kind of dawned on me that, the business, there has to be really clinical competency to be able to drive the business, and vice versa. And I asked another client who I started to really dive in. I started seeing some of the same things, where then she said to me, I just don't want to be salesy, and I feel like I'm being salesy. And so it just really was this aha moment that I don't think it's a one and done thing. And I think when you talk about like how all these years you've been doing this since 2001, I mean, 20 something years, and there's such a richness and experience, but there has to be that kind of drive to want to learn and then continue. Like when I look at the business, you're always evolving and leveling up and shifting and pivoting and changing. And I think that that's so true on the clinical side as well. And so I want us to talk today, Leslie, and I really chose to talk to you first about this because I think that there's a very low barrier to entry, one, in our industry in terms of hanging up the shingle and saying that you are an injector. Many injectors will be frustrated and say, look, it's the wild, wild west. Anybody can say they're a master at something. And then, and this is a medical field, and at the same time, you see now, I have clients that get people in their DMs like, can I come train with you? Can I come train with you? And I think that there's a lot of positive, but there's also a lot of caution. And so I want to kind of just open this conversation together about this whole idea of becoming a trainer and calling yourself a trainer, right? And also, starting to break down and educate what kinds of things new injectors and also growing and learning and advancing injectors should be looking for when they're choosing where to go for their training along their course, clinic along their, I would say, professional clinical career as well. So let's start off by, just talking about from your perspective, new injectors, right? Like, how do they know where to go? What should they be looking for when they want to seek out training and injectables?
So I think the number one thing to look for is who's doing the education. So who are they learning from? Who is going to be their mentor at this point? Because that's going to set you on a trajectory of a different path based on who that person is. So I think picking someone that sits well with your ethos and what your goals are as an injector would be the first and foremost. So they kind of need to have a little bit of a history too, a past history, and you might be able to kind of find out their brand from online, what they excel at. Do their ways resonate with your ways? Because essentially you're going to be adapting a lot of their techniques and their personality traits and a lot of their ways they deliver the message to the patient. So I think that's the first and foremost, is to set that tone with and it might be a company, but what's the company's ethos as well? What's the reputation of the trainer? What are they doing to contribute to the field? Is this a person who just wants to be famous, that's like out there, like Insta famous, and oh, I'm a trainer and I'm this and I'm that? Or do you see them at conferences? Do you see them publishing papers? Do you see them as an educationist at core, meaning that they really love to educate in all aspects of their life? Or is this something they just want to put on their Instagram handle to make their patients more excited about them, that they're a trainer? That's the first thing, I think. The next important thing is, what is the class size like? Because you'll have really well-known companies that do trainings that have kind of have a good module system, if you will, as far as their trainings go. But then when you hear feedback from people who have attended this, and I do hear this a lot, they're in a hotel room with 30 other injectors. They are sharing models. There's no consents there. Like, it's very free for all, not quite as we want it. We're not modeling best practices here. And so kind of figuring out that, like, who's the owner of the company? Are they medical? Are they more corporate? Is there, what is the timing going to be on the hands-on? What's it going to be like? Am I going to have undivided attention? Or is this going to be like, everybody do your own thing and there's some one or two instructors walking around checking on things? Is this company insured? If there was going to be an issue here, are they insured for education purposes? Meaning, if there was some sort of AE, like, who's responsible? Who's the medical director? Who are they working under? Are they injecting in the state that's legal? Like, there's a lot of that stuff that kind of brings the package. And I think reputable companies are going to be more apt to give you those answers. Are they getting CE credits for this? Is this something that has been deemed for accreditation on that form? And then a couple other things too, like, how does this company's reputation stand up in the field? Because oftentimes, they get these certificates and they think they could just go knock on the door and get a job the next day. But that company is kind of known for the type of training I just described. And if someone came looking for a job here that went to one of those trainings, I would probably discount it right away in the fact that they didn't do their research on this educational company, and they went to one of these events and didn't quite get that training that I was hoping they would get. So if you have another company, maybe that's more well-known for a more comprehensive curriculum, that's one-on-one, hands-on, small group sizes, 5 or less, and like, this is a good training, that's going to give you a better leverage when it comes to job hunting. Let's see, how many people have they trained in the past? How long have they been training for? Which is kind of unfair for the people who just started, but with this field being as dynamic as it is, and things changing so quickly and so rapidly, a lot of what I train is based on past 20-year experience. Like, I have so much of that, and I bring it to the table in the curriculum, that if I just started injecting 5 years ago, or a couple years ago, I don't think my my curriculum would be as comprehensive as it is. So I think that really comes into play, is that just kind of that experience level. Those are some things I thought of.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too, because, and I shared the story with you before, that we had a client actually who I've had on this podcast, and she told the story on the podcast, was that she went to a training, like a weekend course somewhere, and she ended up teaching it. She said it was unbelievable. And this is a brilliant woman, a lot of experience, and MD behind her name. And so I'm sure she did her homework, but it can be very deceiving.
It can be. So I think you need to dig deeper into the questions. And one other question I think we should be asking is, are the classes set up in a way where we're all going to have a similar amount of experience? Because that could be very frustrating, like your client, and I've heard this before too, like, I took an advanced class and there was a beginner in there, asking how to reconstitute Botox. And so it can really distract you, derail you from a trajectory of advanced training to oh my gosh, I got to take care of this person. And so you end up kind of babysitting over here and missing out on some of those other people, and vice versa. If you have someone who is in a fundamental class or a foundations class and they're a little bit more experienced, that could be frustrating for them too. So making sure that there's a good relationship with whoever is doing the placement, there's an interview beforehand, maybe, to find out, tell me about your experience, about your practice, tell me a little bit more, and then let me find the class that best suits your needs, versus you going in and just picking from a drop down, assuming that because it says advanced, it's going to be advanced.
Right. No, that's such a good point. And also, what does advanced even mean? You know,
Right. And that is an arbitrary term. So maybe
it really
giving
is.
some specifics.
Yeah. Um, what are like some of the red flags to look for? You know, like if I'm, and I guess, you know, this is such like there's such a spectrum here as we're talking about like training academies, you know, and some that are well known. And um, I also think there's some benefit too to like just learning other people's technique, you know, learning a few different ways, like nobody, you know, and taking what you want from it, whatever. But like, are there some red flags that like, you know, just if you see this or this happens along the process or you show up and this is going on, like this is a red flag for you?
Well, unfortunately, if you show up and it's already going on, you're kind of stuck because you're already there. So you paid the money, and there's really at that point it's going to be a challenge to get out of it. But again, I think it's those questions ahead of time, like where is this class going to be held? And if it's held in a hotel, I personally feel like that is a red flag because it's not medical. You're going to be injecting in surroundings that's not going to be typical what you're going to be used to in the clinic. And then the assumption is that the reason it's in a hotel is because there's going to be so many people that we couldn't fit in a clinic, kind of a thing. So that would be another red flag. Also, what type of curriculum can I expect to leave with, to hear during the didactic and leave with? And if they tell you, oh, you know what, we just spend most of the time on hands-on because that's what's important to people. That to me is a red flag, because not really. I think what is important is setting the foundation up with that evidence-based curriculum, giving them a piece of material to go home with and study, a manual, if you will. And that's the kind of stuff that actually takes a ton of time, and to me sort of separates the great educators from the I want to be an educator. Is the ones who just kind of want to be an educator but aren't interested in running an educational institution, aren't spending the time writing, copywriting, designing curriculum, printing it off, changing it every time you teach. That's the stuff that really separates, I think. So I think that's a great question to ask, like what kind of materials am I going to leave with? And if it's, oh, we'll give you a printout, what does that printout look like? Is it like 3 pages? Is it black and white? Is it in color? Am I going to be able to read it, or the slide's going to be so small? So those enduring materials, I think, are really important. And then how long is the class? That's another red flag. If you have an advanced class or even a foundational class that's like 4 hours, that's a big red flag because there's so much to cover. And if it's limited in time to 4 hours, I think that would be a red flag for me. And then I would always like to know what portion of that is didactic and what portion is hands-on. Both are very important. But if you miss one of those pieces, I think you're missing a big piece to the entire puzzle.
Yeah, let's talk about those puzzle pieces, because we have several clients that have their own training centers in their facility. And I think, something that I learned as you took the time to walk me through and show me the process, even how for the whole client journey, from when they come in to a meeting with having a consultation with the provider, then to the consultant that you have that talks about really like the pricing stuff, the whole approach to how even the bedside manner, all of that kind of stuff. I think that to me, that's so important. Going back to like the first example of realizing that there's the clinical confidence that you have to have, like too, when you leave that training program and you learn how to do something, you have to do it, right? And so there's the process of that. So I'm sure like some part of follow-up or the mentorship kind of component, but then also the ability to talk to a patient, like, and like, if you feel like you're being salesy versus showing them. And I think there was an example you showed me about, like, you showed their after photo. The patient came in, or I'm sorry, the before photo from months before, saying, oh no, I think I'm okay. And you were saying, that's fine. There's no pressure whatsoever. I'm just showing you that this is the changes that have occurred. So you're educating them. So let's
Mhm.
kind of talk about those components and those pieces of what a comprehensive training should include.
And that's one of the reasons I love hosting it at our facility, because we can model best practices from beginning to end. So our clinic is attached to our institute, but we have our institute set up like a clinic. So there's, an injection room, and there's an imaging room for before and after images, and we show them how that consultation process goes. Um, the I always tell people, like, I can teach you how to put in, 8 to 10 syringes in a patient, but if I can't teach you how to sell it, then that's pointless. I can teach you how to sell 8 to 10 syringes, but if you don't know what to do with those
Right.
afterwards, then you're screwed too. So
Yes.
it's you got to have both, because in order to progress and to be more comfortable injecting multiple syringes, which is frankly where the field is going. Pan facial rejuvenation is much more natural looking than spot treating. We know this from studies. We also just know this when we look at the fastest growing practices and people who are really excelling and rising to the top. There are multiple syringe injectors and touching multiple places on the face, facial balancing, pan facial rejuvenation, whatever you want to call it. That
Mhm.
is definitely the trend. And so I love to teach that. So I love to teach it from beginning to end. And you had mentioned our consultation process has kind of 4 parts. I produced a webinar on it that shows everything step by step by step, 2.5 hour webinar that we still have available and it's filmed here in the practice, so you can see it how it rolls out. But the consultation expert that we have doesn't do pricing. I think that should be reserved for the prescriber, the one who's actually giving the prescription of what we're doing. She gives a lot of other things. She credentials the injectors. She talks about, bruising and questions, real world
Mhm.
questions. What's it going to feel like? Are we going to numb you? And all those kind of pre-questions, and shows before and after images of other patients in their same um, decade. And so she does a lot of that pre-work for us, which is
Mhm.
making me productive, because I'm in another room injecting during that time. And
Right.
then they roll through my practice or my office, my clinic room. And then that's when I sit down and write the whole plan out for them with the quote. And it's a whole process, and it's a little bit longer than what I could go over here in this, but that modeling best behavior is really crucial. And if I'm doing this training in a hotel room somewhere, like, those pieces aren't there. They can't see how everything fits, how I hand them the pre-work and then the post-care sheet, and how it just is all part of this well-oiled machine here to, yeah, if one of those pieces of the puzzle is missing, it just doesn't seem to come together as nicely.
Mm. So I'm curious your thoughts on this because, the reality is there's an influx of the demand is growing everywhere, right?
Mhm.
Our industry is going to triple like in the next decade. We have um, a lot of new nurses, and for that reason, there's this innate demand for a lot of new training programs, right? Or a lot of people who feel like, okay, well, I'm the experienced one now because there's a lot of newbies in the field. Is this influx of training programs, is this helping or hurting our industry?
So that was a great question that you posed to me. I think it could be both. I would
Mm.
hope to think it's mostly good. So the statistics are, and I got this from my digital health friends at Allergan.
Mhm.
The market growth is expected to double within 5 years,
Mhm.
and they need 10,000 new injectors a year for the next 5 years. That's 50,000 injectors in order to cover that market growth. And yeah, so 50,000 new injectors in the next 5 years. Clinical proficiency isn't really being met until a injector is seeing 30 patients per month full time for 5 years. So doing the math, it's going to be a while before we catch up, which just means those of us who have clinical proficiency and have experience and tenure, if you will, are going to be super busy for the next 5 years, because that's what we need. We need those experienced people to keep the market growing as fast as it is, because it's only going to grow as fast as those clinical outcomes are good. if the clinical outcomes go down and we're seeing poor outcomes, it's going to stunt the growth for everybody. So that's why education is so important to me, because it matters to everybody that we're getting good outcomes, because it pushes the needle farther as far as industry growth or medical field growth. So is it helping or hurting? It depends. If you are having an educator out there that is teaching bad habits or poor habits from the beginning, not teaching evidence-based medicine, that's just setting up the next generation for poor outcomes, which is going to affect the industry as a whole. But if you can get some sort of, I know you and I had talked about maybe getting some sort of, what were we calling it? I don't even know, but just a way to vet some of these educators and making
Right.
sure that there's some sort of a standard
Yes.
on these educational companies or people educating, then that is going to just rise everything up higher. So it's a double-edged sword, I guess. I don't know how to answer that, I guess. It really depends on where you're taking your education to see if
Well,
it's going to help or hurt.
Well, and I think, if I asked this question to 20 injectors, I'd get 20 different answers, and it's hard to separate yourself too, right? Like the reality is, because if you asked me like, oh, if there were, 20 new pop leadership academies, well, it's like, well, could care less about one more of them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, if there's that demand, it's so interesting, because when you started to talk about the need for a 10,000 new injectors a year.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my mind is blown. That's
Mm-hmm.
insane.
That's the need. So we will have a nursing shortage, if you will, a
Yeah,
medical shortage if we don't train 10,000 new injectors a year, because the way the trends are going, the demand is so high that we need people to deliver the services.
yeah,
And you look at how many people you can see in a day, and that's how all those statistics get put together. And if we don't train 10,000 new injectors a year to have positive outcomes, we will definitely have a plateau or a crash, and we will have a shortage of medical providers injecting.
Well, look, and when we say this, like, I would think that then if this was the case, every single business should be completely slammed. Like, there shouldn't be any business, med spa, injector that is not fully booked.
And in the real world, mostly they are. I think the good ones are. And not even, I'm not even saying you have to be great. I always like to say this. You started out with like the branding and the patient experience. You could be a mediocre injector, mediocre, but have a beautiful patient experience and care for the patient and spend time with the patient, and you will flourish. There is no doubt, because people are craving the experience and they crave that relationship. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily like, oh, you have to be a 22-year injector with patents and doing all this other stuff to be good. You just have to care for your patient and treat them kindly. Like, it's not that hard. But in the end, people, I think like, oh, I'm only going to be better if I take all of these classes and do all this stuff. And that was another point I was going to bring up, is that sometimes people actually see education as almost like it's like their stamp of approval, and they get a little bit hindered if they aren't constantly educating. They're like trapped by the notion that if they're only as good as the next class that they take, and so they're crippled and their confidence is stunted until they can take another class on anatomy or another class on cadaver. And it's like, at some point you're going to have to trust that you know what to do and actually execute some of this stuff. You can't just keep signing up for classes. I mean, education is great and we should always sign up, but if we're finding our value in that only and never trusting ourselves and having that confidence, then it really doesn't do you any good. So there's another way to look at education. Most people are undereducated, I'll say, but there is another subset of people who are very skilled, very talented, but they continue to just don't have the confidence that they need to get to their patients and do the right thing for them.
Yeah. It's so funny because we talk about this a lot with entrepreneurs, right? And like just imposter syndrome in a sense. And I had a conversation recently with a client who said, well, I went through residency with like these, doctors that are like in my area or whatever. And I have just continued to, for the way she sort of describes it, is advanced. And, she's done a lot more of her own clinical research and her own thinking. And so she
Mhm.
has her own methodologies and her own
Mhm.
programs and protocols and things, where like a lot of her colleagues look at
Mhm.
her like, why are you so out of the box? And I wonder if
Mhm.
that comes from just the medicine side of aesthetics, where, let's say I went to get a nursing degree as an example, like here's module 1, here's module 2, right? There's obviously the hands-on and all of that too, but
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
someone is telling you that you now have that, check that box, you have that degree, you have that certification, you have that competency. Whereas this sort of, it's just so nuanced because it's so new and growing, but it really does take, I think, like leaning in and trying things and doing it right to like get that full experience.
Absolutely. I, I mean, education is an interesting thing. Curriculum, comprehensive curriculum. What should the best educational facility or our company operate or offer? I think it starts with that medicine. I mean, yes, it is an art, but if you don't have the evidence base to back it up, um, it's just you flippantly saying, "Oh, I tried this one time and it worked." Like, but you've got to kind of have that research behind it, and that's the time that it takes those educators to really do that research. And to me, that is what kind of separates the good educators from the mediocre. But also training curriculum that is comprehensive should have new material, because this field is dynamic and it is, essentially less than 20 years old. I mean, about 20, 21, when you think of just Botox, but fillers in itself really didn't take off until Voluma was approved in 2013 and we started doing the whole face. So we're looking at, 10 years or so. And so if we're not bringing anything new to the table, which is another issue sometimes with stagnant training companies that have been around for a while, which is something I told you in the beginning to look for. But if
Yeah.
they're not constantly changing and
Mhm.
constantly evolving and updating that curriculum, I mean, every time I go to the printer, probably twice a week, and my husband's like, "Can you just like order, 50 of these and not send me to the printer?" I'm like, "No, because I just found this thing out. I got to add it. Like they need to know. Like I'm just compulsively adding new material because I feel like if I don't tell my trainees that I'm leaving out something really important." And so it should constantly be evolving and having those new concepts and new techniques. And then you should also be able to follow up with that trainer, and you should be able to reach out to them and say, "Hey, I tried this. I have a question, or I've got a patient coming in and I know this is a new technique for me. Here's what I'm thinking. What do you?" And so that relationship, I think that's another thing to look for when you're looking at
Yeah.
training companies, is how accessible are those people afterwards? Or is it just kind of this company that you never hear from again, that you're getting your certificate from? And remember, there's no like certification for this. You're getting a certificate, but it's not a certification.
Leslie, I have a question from your experience. I think something that's unique about you too is that I know we're talking about, and as I look, we're on video together and I can see you in your beautiful clinic, but you're on the road doing a lot of training, both, under the umbrella of injectability, but also you're an AMI trainer. I think you train the AMI trainers too. Like, I think I actually don't know the answer to that, but I believe. So from your experience, I think too, like you get to take in so many different perspectives and bring them back. And I think that's probably why you're like, oh, when I was teaching this with this patient, or,
Yeah.
you're sort of learning as you're teaching. I would love, I'm just curious because as we're talking about this now, this influx in need for new injectors and the proficiency. So I'm seeing this sort of like balance beam, right?
Hmm.
I'm curious from your perspective of training trainers all over the place, or training injectors, excuse me. Um, is there something, is there a value for an injector to not just start out on her own, but to really start under the wing of somebody, potentially, even if they felt entrepreneurial? I think like 90% of injectors think they want to start their own company from my perspective. That's what they don't know what it takes to
Well,
have a business.
I think you're a little skewed though, because they'll reach out to you when they're at that point. So your perception might be a little bit skewed,
Okay.
because I talk to a lot of people on my end who are like, "I would never want to run my own practice. I see all the days
Yeah.
in, days out." But by the time they reach you, they're already in that mode and they need you as a coach. So that makes sense coming from you. But on my perspective, I don't think that is entirely true as far as the percentages. But what I do agree with 100% is that it is almost crucial to work with someone else before opening up your own business.
Mm.
I had the wonderful privilege of working for a plastic surgeon for 7 years. Before I left, I actually worked for a dermatologist simultaneously. So I got to see kind of the derm side of things, which is very different. And each one of those brought great things. Like plastics is really good with their before and after imaging. Derm is not. Derm is very good with using medical assistance. Plastics are not. So like I was able to kind of pull some really great things from both of those, and both offices were wonderful and giving me autonomy, but also being there if I needed questions. And then in between, I worked at a medical spa too, and got to see kind of the small business run. And so I mean, 100% that, and going into everyone else's office and seeing how things are done right and wrong, has brought together the entire package of opening up my own practice. And so you kind of need that frame of reference before you open up, to have the ideas of what you want to do to start your own brand and start your own business. So I think having that mentorship there with someone, otherwise you just kind of feel like you're injecting on an island and you never know, is this normal or is this not normal? Is there a better way to do this or
Mhm.
not? And you might go to a class or two and see a couple other people, but until you have that person to bounce ideas off with, and that's what's so nice about our practice. There's 5 nurse practitioners and we're always collaborating. We're like, oh, I got to show you this before and after. What do you think of this? How do you feel this? This is the technique I use. And we always have like clinical review, and that's what makes you better.
Yeah.
So if you don't have that, it's going to be challenging, I think, to start off from the beginning.
Yeah. No, I know. I think back. That's why I picked like a group practice for my kids for their pediatricians. Cause I'm like, I don't want
Hmm.
someone just making their own, if like they're doubtful about something, I want them to go be able to talk to a colleague, like down the way. So, okay, I'm going to just take this one layer deeper, and I'm just curious how you would handle this situation. So, you know, one of the main challenges or fears that I hear, from our clients who are looking to then scale up their business and bring in other injectors is that I'm afraid if I train them and teach them, they're going to then leave me. So if it is in fact the case that it's almost crucial for someone to go and have mentorship and learn from someone else before they start, do we need to flip that narrative? Like, should it be more that this is the way the industry is going to happen? Like your injectors are going to come work for you for a few years and then they're going to go out on their own. Or is it, you have to get that straight with that injector in the beginning when you bring them in? What's your thought about that?
Yeah, I hear that all the time too.
Mhm.
And as a business owner myself, it is a fear. But I think one thing that you missed is make your practice so incredible they would never want to leave.
Mm,
That's the bottom line. I mean, if
mm,
you treat them with such incredible respect and give them everything they need in a relationship and in a practice, including their salary and including resources and accommodations for things that they need, scheduling and childcare, whatever it is, if you love them, make them stay just by sheer love, and the way you're treating them. I don't think you should. Well, it's another point on commission and that kind of stuff. But I think if you just treat your patient or your providers well, the chances of them leaving are less. And then give them increase in roles too, because they also leave not just because they're being not treated well, but they want growth. So if they can't have growth, then they may leave and try and find someplace else. So if you see that like entrepreneurial spirit, or you see that they're kind of getting restless in their everyday, position, then give them something new to do. Give them like a challenge. Like, okay, I want you to head this IV bar. I want you to head this, weight loss clinic that we're going to start doing, or some things that you see, or hey, I want you to start training for me now because, I'm getting so busy with trainings. And so you're getting great. And let's, move you here. And so just kind of working with what you see they're wanting to do, what they're comfortable doing. That to me is key. But at the end of the day, you can't go into an interview like that, like, oh, I'm not going to hire you if you're going to leave and start your own place. If you see red flags to begin with, like before you interview them, and sometimes, these insta famous injectors aren't the best people to have to bring onto your practice, because that tells me sometimes that they're like already on this trajectory of being their own person or their own
Mhm.
business. So if this is something that's really important to you, I would actually look at hiring people with less experience and less social media presence and groom them in the
Mm,
practice,
mm,
and just really bring them into the family and hope that this becomes something that they just won't ever leave. But the reality is, more than likely, one or two of them will, and that's okay. I just told you
yeah.
the statistics. You know, we're doubling the market within 5 years. There's going to be more business for everybody, and if they are wanting to leave and start their own place, and you're not allowing them, they're not going to be happy there anyway. So how?
Yeah.
What good is that?
Yeah, no, I love that answer. I mean, that warms my heart. I like to think I lead my business that way, but I too have had, I went through a big, a long period of time, I should say, where I really took it personally when when it didn't
Oh,
work out,
I
when I
mean, who
started,
wouldn't? Like, if you
yeah,
didn't take it personal, it would be a mention of your character. Like, I definitely take it
yeah,
personal when people would want to leave. I would take it personal, but you have to look at the whole picture. So
exactly.
the whole picture is that, family sometimes supersedes, or they're moving, or there's things that they need that you're not able to offer, or, and that's okay. But yeah, of course, we hold them so close to our heart that's the trouble of being such a close family, is like, oh gosh, what if this were to happen?
Yeah. It sounded like you had an opinion on commission that you wanted to share.
I don't use commission and for any of our medical providers. I feel like it is against the law. It's actually against the law, and I don't think it's ethical. I don't ever want a provider to choose a treatment plan based on how much money they're going to make. I want them to make that decision based on what the patient needs. Do I compensate my injectors well? I do. We're in a very affluent field, if you will.
Mhm.
We do, make good income here, and they deserve to be paid well. They're very well educated, and they are incredible providers. But I don't incentivize based on a number of syringes or units. I just don't think that's fair to the patient.
Yeah, there was a trend like for a while I was noticing just in my small, little cohort of clients where the really great I was seeing like the practices that were, I would say, growing more sustainably, that were retaining people, were not commissioning,
Hmm.
actually not commissioning their providers.
Hmm.
And so, and it was just something I noticed, that I think when you have people that are coming for, to your point, the entire work environment, the culture, place they can bring the baby on Fridays. I mean, right. Things like that. Right. I talk a lot about, like, I think we underestimate really great people who want like A players, like they
Hmm.
can go make money anywhere, right? And so
Hmm.
they want a growth plan, they want to work for a great boss, they want to show up and feel
Hmm.
fulfilled in the work they do.
Hmm.
And so I think those are all important pieces. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to kind of get your opinion about that.
I mean,
Uh,
imagine, and this is why it's against the law. If your cardiologist was incentivized by how many medications he gave you, that
mhm,
wouldn't be a fair treatment plan, because he's getting paid more based on how many medications, and do you really need those medications?
yeah.
So if we really want to re-medicalize aesthetics, which is something I'm completely passionate about, I feel like people see it as hair and nails and they don't see it as medicine. But
Uh,
we want to pick and choose where we implement the remedicalization. But this has got to be one of them, because in real medicine, non-aesthetic, non-cash medicine, you would never incentivize a physician or a nurse practitioner by how many prescriptions they wrote, or how many patients they saw in a day. Like, it's just it doesn't make sense. It's not ethical for the patients, and that's why there's a federal law against it, because of that. So I feel like if we're going to follow some federal laws for medicine, we need to kind of follow them all. But
yeah.
that's my personal opinion, and I do bonus. It's not like I don't bonus at the end of the year, or do profit sharing. We do profit sharing, so there's some ways around it, but we don't certainly do not do every paycheck based on what their sales were.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to just one more off track question, and then I'll ask a final question, then we can wrap up and let you get back to work. Why can't our pharma companies, why can't Allergan just make sure that, like, every injector is competent and proficient? Like why, like, you know, I'm just kind of playing that card there.
Mhm. Well, I think they're trying. I know last year Allergan did 40,000 educational activities, and that's their second largest spend behind research and development in the entire company of AbbVie. And so they're doing their best, but that's just one company, number one. They spend more than any other company. I do know that as well, but they spend a ton. But still, at that, even at their goals of how many injectors they're trying to train in the next 5 years, it's impossible. And also, they're not an accreditation or certification company, it's a pharmaceutical company. So the fact that they do any at all is like incredible. And it's phenomenal that they would invest that kind of money in education. They don't have to. It's very unusual in traditional medicine, going back to that path, that your diabetes medication pharma rep is going to have a class where you can teach people how to educate their patients on how to use this, pod or whatever. Like, it just doesn't happen. You kind of just have to learn on the job. But in aesthetics, it is something that they have taken a certain importance and put a certain dollar amount, which is, large amount, but it's still impossible. And also, they can only teach to on label, which thankfully for Allergan is about 89% of the face, but they are limited by their FDA regulations to only train to on label areas. And there are so many areas that we treat that are off label. And so that is where the non-pharma educational companies come into play, like myself and others that are out there. And so we can kind of take up where the pharmaceutical companies have left off.
Yeah. Well, and the lived experience of treating patients and running a business. I mean, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, they try. They have a business development track. They've got, your AMIs, which are hands-on in clinic, but it's still, there's just a limit to how many of those and how much money is spent and how much time is spent and how many injectors they have.
Yeah. Okay. So that brings me to my last question, because, maybe if I'm listening to this and I'm like, well, I've been injecting for long enough, and, I feel like it's sort of the next step now for aesthetic injector owners who are like, okay, I've got running a decent business. Like, now I'm going to start a training academy.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when we do the math, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I would, to get from your perspective, and you obviously have such a strong team and you have people to support you, to build that. You have invested a lot into that side of the business. But do you think this is a good business model for every experienced injector to say, now I should start a training academy?
So the advantages to having a training company is credentialing for your patients. So prospective patients look at, your website and they see that you're a trainer. That gives them confidence. So that's a great thing that I think encourages a lot of successful injectors out there to start their own training academy. But when you look at the revenue with both businesses, it's definitely more lucrative to stay in the practice injecting.
Mm-hmm.
If you run a very successful practice. If you have time off during the week where you're not booked and you could be doing something else, then, then you have two businesses that you run.
Mm-hmm.
But not everybody is a good trainer. That's the other really big piece of this puzzle. Just because you're a good injector and you have a lot of experience doesn't mean you know how to work with different personality types and you know how to impart confidence to people. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing that people forget. Not only do you need to be a public speaker, which a lot of people aren't, because you need a lecture, you need to give some sort of didactic portion, but you need to deal with multiple different personalities and turn on a dime based on what that personality is bringing to you, and figure out what each person needs to leave that training feeling like it was money well spent. And that's going to be different for every single person in your class.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to be on 24/7 because those questions come. Like, I don't even take breaks during these things. I can't check my phone. I go dark. I tell the office I'm dark. I'm training. Like, my focus is there.
Right.
So it's a different type of personality that is an educator, and it's not even like an educator like a teacher would be. It's a mentor too, and Yeah, I don't know that it's the best business model for everybody, but certainly for those who have some of those gifts, I mean, it's a wonderful blessing too to be able to be on both sides of this coin and really experience both sides of the business.
Hmm. I love that. Well, and I think that's the point right here. And, what you and I are trying to put together and work on is a set of standards, a set of, way to evaluate and know that, look, if I invest my money into learning, I'm going to get what I'm paying for. I know
Hmm.
that there's going to be, you know, an ROI for me on this,
Hmm.
and I'm not going to bump into some of these red flags. So, yes, this is our call to action, I will say. So,
Hmm.
that is sort of my, end of my questions for you, Leslie. Is there anything else you think we missed or that you would want to just sort of say as like a final word, around this topic or other?
Yeah, I actually was just kind of looking through my notes. I just want to make sure I mentioned, I don't know that I did, how important talking about in the didactic portion, anatomy and AEs. So, a lot of trainings won't go into that. It's kind of its own training in itself, but I think it's important to work that into the curriculum that you're delivering. So when you're teaching a Botox class, make sure that you cover like what could happen if you don't do this, will happen, this could happen. And then how do you correct this? You need to do that. So there's like this little treatment pathway. Um, and and that also takes experience because you have to have lived through it, but also research and kind of making sure that you have the tools at your disposal to talk through complications with your prospective trainees. And anatomy, of course, can't be overstated, but those are things to look for in your classes that you're looking for.
Awesome. Thank you for that. What an exciting time.
It is. It really. I just feel so blessed to be in this field because it's so exciting.
Yeah. And you're not worn out after all that travel, all the travel.
I'm totally worn out. I am, but I sleep really well, and I have a really great supportive family and team that lifts me up and that does a lot of stuff for me. That makes it all possible. But yeah, it is. It's pretty exhausting for sure,
Yeah.
but it's exhilarating. I'm just completely exhilarated every time I do an educational training.
Well, we love it. And we in our academy have several clients who are just huge fans of your work, and are in constant conversation with you too. But you've made a big impact. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. I almost forgot. Someone asked me to ask you if you had any travel tips, like any kind of secret sauce, because I can't pack like one carry-on suitcase for the life of me, but like you always show up dressed to the nines, accessorized, like any advice around how to like travel well.
Absolutely. I have gotten really good at this. You should have seen me in high school. I was the one that carried, way too many bags, but I had to get good because we mostly do carry on. I'd say like 99% of the time I'll do carry on, even for like 8 days. So
Wow.
here's my tip. It starts with the shoes. So whatever pair of shoes you're wearing on the plane, that's probably going to be your pair of shoes that you need to match every outfit with. You might be able to slip in one other extra set of flats in a carry-on, but it's the shoes and then probably one jacket or sweater that you wear on the plane. And I have to put medical supplies in there too. Like I have to
Oh
travel
my.
with my medical supplies. So it's that plus my clothes. Um, there, the accessories, I kind of stack them all together and put, stuff inside. I put, underwear and things inside of other things. I have one toiletry bag that I just keep packed all the time that has just the smallest little things of
Yeah.
things. This, you should see this thing of hairspray. It's like that big. So really go for those small travel accessories and make them work for you. But really, if you can keep it to one or two pairs of shoes tops, you'll be fine. Yeah, that's and those tennis shoes take up a lot of room. So I'm not a big tennis shoe wearer, but if you do wear them, then make sure you wear them on the plane because then it won't take up your space in the suitcase. Oh, and I make a list. I actually have a list of what I'm wearing on each day to make sure I have the right accessories for it.
Oh my gosh. That is
Yeah.
just too much. Yeah, I was already off with the shoes. Like I probably pack a, and I just don't know what I'm going to want to feel like wearing, and that I should just not let myself go there, I
You
think.
have to feel what you're wearing before you leave. You're gonna have to go, well, on Thursday, I'm gonna feel like wearing this because I've got to do that. And you've got to kind of plan it all out.
Yeah, it's like your meal prep or something. Okay, well,
Exactly.
we're requesting a video, an Instagram video of Leslie packing for a trip.
Oh,
So put that on
okay.
the
Oh,
list.
I
Yeah.
actually have a great picture of my little nesting dolls. I have a
Oh,
really
love it.
big tote for my carry-on. You know, they say you have the carry-on plus one extra bag, which is supposed to be your purse. That's pretty big. And I have usually, I'll send you the picture. I
Okay.
have the tote and then a smaller tote and then my purse inside of that. So I get like 3 bags inside my carry-on. So
Genius.
yes.
I love it. I love
Nesting dolls.
nesting doll. That's so great. Well, thank you so much, Leslie. And I think you were going to have a special offer as well for
Yeah.
any injectors who were looking to come in and access your wisdom and that incredible experience at Injectability.
Yeah. So the promotion that we're running is that if you did want to take a live class from myself or one of my educationists around the country, that you could register. We have a Shopify. You can get on our Instagram, which is Injectability Beauty, or my own personal Instagram, Leslie Fletcher NP, and also on our website. There's links everywhere. And then you can kind of hover over each class that we're doing. It gives you a description, and then you click on it to purchase, and then you can add the code 200 off for a live training.
That's very generous of you. Thank
For
you.
watching the webinar. Thank you
Yay.
for hosting it.
Yeah, no, of course. So this is wonderful. So I will add all of that info into the show notes and on
Perfect.
our end so that everybody has access to that. And thanks again, Leslie. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you, and I look forward to continuing this conversation and building some real support and tools and structure for injectors who are looking to get the right kind of training, and hopefully everybody pops in and sees you as well. So thanks so much.
Sounds good. Well, thank
All
you
right.
for hosting.
Okay, take care.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.